I was. Wasn't I, Ben?
Yeah.
You certainly were.
That was my evil twin.
And we'll get started here in a little bit. So you see, Rick Hendrick was the one who paid $225,000 for the Volt.
Yeah, it was nice. Boy, how about this clammy thing?
Oh my God.
Well, you knew when the feds were investigating. We've known the feds have been investigating for at least, 4 years? Or 3 years?
I was talking to Jason Vines, and he said they started their initial investigation in 2002. So they've been after Kwame for some time.
2002.
And
That's what Jason said.
And they kept bringing, and it must have been difficult because these guys are constantly, well, why aren't you doing something? Why aren't you doing something?
I know.
They're just, because they're wiretapping, they don't come out in public unless they think they've got a case.
Yeah, right.
They've got it.
That's what they were saying on WWJ this morning to, who's the federal agent that's running this whole thing, some woman. But Roberta Justine on WWJ said, well, the other legal people are saying you can indict a sandwich. And she was like, wait a minute. We brought these indictments because we're pretty confident they are going to get convictions. Going back 2 years ago when I talked to some people fairly high level in Wayne County, they thought then, this is 2 years ago, before any of this stuff broke, that it was going to be Bernard Kilpatrick because of stuff at Cobo Hall. Forget the water department, forget the sludge hauling contracts at Cobo Hall. And I was just down there last night at Cobo. You can't believe how much of that show is already built up. And I know one of the things that they've wanted to avoid is full overtime the week between Christmas and New Year's, where they have to pay these guys triple time. And it's all, so nothing gets done so they can max out the overtime that week.
Not anymore.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
Well, I got off the plane this morning and to looking up and seeing Fox 2 News, and they had Brooks
50
on.
seconds, guys.
And it was like, that's right in his wheelhouse, all the Kwame stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And he was just
Well,
knocking
the
it.
water thing. I mean, the water thing alone.
Right.
It's amazing.
Hey, Ben, is Scotty in Cleveland on there? Do you know?
I do not have my chat open yet.
That's okay. Just say hi to him.
Well, so I think there's more coming down. I hope they get Monica Conyers and put her away for a long time.
Well, she's in, but she might be in longer.
Yeah, but she was in for what is it?
2 years.
2 years or something.
Yeah, she's due out pretty
All right,
soon.
guys. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone, passion for excellence. Chevrolet, the all-new Chevrolet Cruze. Get used to more. Dow Automotive Systems, improving durability and increasing design flexibility with Betamate structural adhesives at dowbetamate.com. And by Hyundai. Experience the 2011 Hyundai Sonata today at HyundaiSonata.com.
So here we are, After Hours, and joining me like he always does, or is it me joining him as I always do? The bodacious Autoextremist, as I called you on Autoline Daily today.
John, pleasure to be here.
It is good to be here.
Good to be alive.
Yeah.
Hello out there to all my fan.
And mine, so we got
got
an
two.
audience of 2 here, plus us, so we just doubled it that way. So big news this week, for me at least, was the North American Car and Truck of the Year finalists were announced today.
Yeah, and you're on that panel, John. I'm not. I'm persona not gonna happen.com, but what do you think? What are they? We should tell them.
Yeah, we should tell the audience. For Car of the Year, the finalists were The Nissan Leaf,
Chevy Volt.
Chevy Volt, and Hyundai Sonata.
And you and I both just got through saying, wait a minute, wasn't the Sonata there last year? It was one of the finalists last year?
Yeah, I could have sworn I first drove the Sonata last year, but they've been rolling out additional models. So the base car came out, and then they had the turbo come out,
hybrid.
and now the hybrid's coming out too. So that's why I kind of thought, boy, wasn't that base car out a year ago? But no, it's one of the finalists.
So that's 50 journalists for the most part.
For the most part.
There's some ringers in there. There's some oddities.
Yes.
It had to be the Volt. It's the technological tour de force of this year. And the Leaf, which you drove.
Right.
Which, as I said in my column, the electrification of the U.S. automobile is only going to apply in limited areas of the country and in limited climates, because what were you saying? You're driving the Leaf and you put the heater on and you lose 10 miles?
10 miles right off the bat. Right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you, this week, when it's been like 7, that's not going to work very well.
8 degrees as I drove to work this morning.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have to keep that heater on full blast.
Yeah.
And then the Sonata, which is a very significant car, I think. When you look at the numbers, it's already selling in. We don't have to, forecast how it's going to sell. It's already, knock it out of the park kind of a sales success. Very significant car. I think for Hyundai, very significant.
Yeah, because, Hyundai went from the little engine that couldn't to the little engine that could, and they needed this mainstream component, this hit, this car that everyone from the critics to the casual American car shopper, it resonates, with both those groups. And so now the Sonata name is all of a sudden a player in the mainstream market, and Hyundai's needed that, and now that they have that, watch out.
Another thing I think we've seen the U.S. and South Korea move forward a lot on this free trade agreement. They've hammered out the agreement. Now it's got to be ratified by the U.S. Senate. But I believe Hyundai, which could have imported more, I think I kicked the table, Peter, and spilled your coffee there.
There's a leak in the cup.
Yeah, there is no hole in the cup. I think I accidentally kicked the table. But no, what I'm getting at is I think Hyundai could have imported more of them, not just build them at their plant in Alabama. My guess is they didn't want to cause any ruffles with all this negotiating going on with the free trade agreement, and all of a sudden they're bringing in all these extra cars from Korea. So my guess is if and when I think it will get ratified, this free trade agreement, that could open up more capacity for Sonatas, because as you know, they're capacity constrained right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Needless to say, the Sonata is now going to be one of these car names that's just part of the Accord Camry thing.
I agree. So we should talk about the 3 truck finalists too, because I was kind of surprised by that. The Ford Explorer is on there, no surprise at all to me. Absolutely deserving to be up there. And the Jeep Grand Cherokee, that's not a surprise to me at all. What was a surprise, but one that I actually gave a lot of votes to, the Dodge Durango. Mm-hmm. And it's a remarkably good driving car. I think for 2 reasons when you compare it to the Grand Cherokee, because as you know, they're both built in the same plant, go down the same line, essentially the same platform. But the Durango's coming 6 months later, so it's just got that little bit more extra calibration time, development at the proving ground. And since it's designed for primarily on-road use, it doesn't have to have quite the ground clearance and all that stuff that the Grand Cherokee does, because the Grand Cherokee damn well better do the Rubicon Trail, where it's not a real Jeep. So on-road, it doesn't quite handle as well as the Durango.
And the Explorer is, I think the people out there are going to come to know is going to be a sensational vehicle.
I'm dying to see how that thing sells.
Yeah.
And I'm also intrigued that they've got a 2-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder engine that's not at launch. That'll
Like,
come
what's
later.
that, next spring?
I think so.
Late
I don't
spring.
remember the exact.
And they're going to charge a premium for it, like they
charge-
do in the F-150, right?
Right. And I've driven the 2-liter EcoBoost in the Ford Edge, which is not quite as big as the Explorer, but it's not a small vehicle.
No, it
it's
isn't.
a chunky, heavy vehicle. I was knocked out how well that engine performed. And, you know, you and I have driven turbo engines, but this is more than a turbo engine, because when you add direct fuel injection, and this is where it really gets critical, variable valve timing on both the exhaust and the intake, and then coming up with the software that controls all this stuff, it's magic. I mean, it is absolutely magic how well it works.
Yeah, and add to that the overall aura in the interior of the vehicle, and I think consumers out there are going to be pretty wowed by some of these new products coming.
I think so. And, you know, I've been watching sales of the Grand Cherokee. First month was like 10,000. Second month was 12,000. Third month, it dropped back a little bit. It was around 11,000. But those are pretty good numbers in today's market.
Yeah.
And so it'll be fascinating to see how the Explorer comes out against that.
And I also the Explorer, the commercials for the Explorer are going to be quite interesting. when
Oh,
you
no
see
kidding.
them. Yeah. They're going to break sometime after the first of the year.
Well, you know, Chrysler's got to be really happy with the success of the Grand Cherokee, because, you know, let's just say, to make the math easy, it's 10,000 a month. There's 120,000 vehicles for that plant just in the American market. We're not counting Canada or any exports.
Well, they absolutely had to have that. Would save the company.
Right.
They had to have that be good
And,
well received.
And I'm going to be real curious to see how well the Durango sells, because that plant could make easily, without even trying, $1 billion net profit out of that one assembly plant.
So that's a Dodge Durango. It's not a Ram,
Correct.
which is still the most boneheaded thing, marketing thing of the year by far. I don't care. I've heard every rationalization. It makes no sense. Zero.
So how long before they put the two brands back together?
Well, who knows? I don't think Sergio likes to admit he was wrong at any given time in his entire life. So
You're probably right on that one.
So probably not in our lifetimes.
So it'll be very interesting to see how this car and truck of the year goes, because, again, there's no advertising tied into it, so the jurors can just call it like they see it. And because of the way the points system works, it really rewards the collective best choice of the jury, not, you know, some editor-in-chief, you know, ramrodding his favorite choice through with the rest of the staff.
Well, let's talk about that, because, you know, I came from an era when the Motor Trend Car of the Year was bought and paid for
Right.
beforehand.
Why? Well, you know, the word then was, I can't remember who the name of the publisher, but
Bob Brown.
Bob Brown, who would just, through his contacts, find out who had the best advertising budget, and that's who won.
Well, when I was creative director at BBDO Detroit on Dodge, you know, they came to me and said, you know, we need to put together a pitch. I said, for what? I said, for Motor Trend Car of the Year. I said, oh, we're going to get it? He said, no. They want to see what we're going to do if we get it. And we had the Dodge Lancer at the time, and they had a sport package. And I said, what? And we did. We did this big pitch. Lancer didn't win the Car of the Year, because maybe our advertising wasn't that great. I don't know, but it was just, I already knew that beforehand. And then Motor Trend had this big change, this is never going to happen again. And I don't know when that really kicked in, because the time period I was talking about was 87. So maybe in the 90s sometime they got away from that. And it's legit now. But of the car of the year, I don't know if they can compare to the North American car of the year just by the way they do it.
Right.
Because it's just a magazine now.
Well, the other thing too is, and I'm not trying to knock them, but whether you're talking about Motor Trend, Car and Driver,
Automobile.
Road Track, Automobile, they're for enthusiasts. So they're going to pick vehicles that enthusiasts are going to want.
Yeah.
And that's what I want too, by the way. But when we created the North American Car and Truck of the Year Award, the whole goal was, how do we, for the American public, for the average car buyer, say, we collectively, these 50 journalists, think this is the best one. So, yeah, we're not going to pick a Porsche Cayenne as an SUV, more than likely, simply because of the price. It's out of reach of the vast majority of car buyers in this country. And so to say that should be the car of the year is, sometimes they may deserve it. Sometimes a luxury car does deserve it. But again, if you want to say for the average car buyer, here's the one you really ought to put on your list or at least go check it out, price really becomes important.
Yeah. Yeah, because if, I put on our site this week in the year-end issue, our favorites, my favorites. And, something about the Detroit show coming up, Porsche's saying they have a surprise.
A spectacular surprise, is what they say.
A spectacular, like in Moulin Rouge. But anyway, at first I thought it was going to be the production version of the 918. But now I'm thinking that it will be the new mid-engine Porsche sports car below the Boxster.
Oh, really?
I've been thinking about it today. What's spectacular?
I hope you're right, because when I first read that, I thought, I didn't see the spectacular, I just saw Porsche's going to have something new. I thought it would be the Cajun, the baby Cayenne.
Well, yeah, but that'd be kind of...
But that's not spectacular.
No, that's not spectacular. So would it be the production version of the 918? Well, they just showed the 918. So maybe the production version would be spectacular if it was finished and there was a sticker and all that stuff. But they showed that Volkswagen Blue Sport concept 2 years ago. Remember the little mid-engine thing?
Right.
And now that Volkswagen owns Porsche, all that's going on, and they've said that Volkswagen's going to get one, and Porsche's going to get one, and Audi's going to get one, which that doesn't bode well for me. But anyway, so logically, to me, that's what it would be. Unless they show, because they were going to hold the 911 back, the new 911, for next year's Frankfurt Auto Show. So they're not going to do that, because they have to reveal the new 911 in the fatherland.
Right.
So that's the only thing I could think of, is this new Porsche that slots in below the Boxster and the Cayman.
That would be awesome.
Because remember when they first showed the Boxster concept in Detroit, which 96 or 7?
Something like that, right.
So maybe I've been thinking about that for some reason all day.
Well, that would be pretty cool because, the Boxster came out as sort of like the affordable Porsche, and like all cars do, slowly but surely marched up the price point.
Porsche's like masters of that. Their option list is just an unbelievable trip through escalating. I mean, you can order leather on the vents, on the air vents inside, and I forget how much that is, but I mean, they've got stuff in there that's just crazy.
That is crazy. Hey, we got to talk about one of our sponsors for the show here, and since Hyundai is a sponsor, and the Hyundai Sonata, more specifically, and we've just been talking about the Sonata, we should start pushing our audience to HyundaiSonata.com. And one of the things that we ought to talk about is the interior on that car. It's pretty well done, and especially from a packaging standpoint, what I've liked about the car is you have decent front seat room, decent rear seat room, and yet a pretty good trunk. And I mention that because sometimes car companies will cheat stuff. They'll want real big trunk room, and then you have no rear leg room.
Right.
Or vice versa, great leg room in the rear, and then no trunk space. And I don't know what they've done, but they've done a pretty good job of really balancing the interior packaging on that.
Well, you know, like we said, it's a transformative car for Hyundai on so many levels. And, you know, just the fact that they finally, you know, we talk about the importance of design, and it's so important. And they got it right with that car. And inside and out. And it's still, you know, it's pretty ballsy that they designed the car around the four-cylinder and made that decision from the get-go. That affected so many things.
Well, it took so much weight out of the car.
Yeah.
You know, because if you don't have that big lump of a V6 up in front, you can start taking structure out, which now means, guess what? Your brakes don't have to be as big, which means, you know, the suspension can be downsized ever so slightly, and it just cascades through the car that way.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks to Hyundai for being on board.
Hey, another thing this week, milestone, Chuck Jordan, former head of design at General Motors, passed away. I don't know, he was well into his 80s, I believe.
He was 83.
83, well, maybe not that well into his 80s, but still, not a whole lot of VPs of design in the history of that position. And he was what, number 4? Wasn't it?
There was Harley Earl, Bill Mitchell, Irv Rybicki, and then
Chuck Jordan. And I know with Rybicki, I know in design staff, a lot of people felt that he didn't fight the system hard enough.
Well, what happened was, I mean, GM, I mean, like I've written this before, but GM was like the Yankees in their peak years. GM didn't just win you know, some big time games. They won the championship every year, and they had one design legend, Harley Earl, who sort of invented the craft, followed by another design legend. You know, no car company has had a run like that with Earl, followed by Mitchell. I mean, that was just you know, an unbelievable run. But what happened was GM Styling, which I still like when it was called GM Styling, they were all powerful. I mean, you know, by the time Mitchell took over, he had such an outlandish personality. You know, I've written about he lived down the street and all that. But, you know, these general managers who were all powerful in their own rights would have to lobby Mitchell for what they wanted, because if Mitchell didn't like it, it wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
Or he'd call him up and say, come over here, I want to show you something.
And Mitchell, of course, like Earl before him, reported directly to the chairman, not
Right.
the president of the
Yeah.
company, to the chairman.
And for the most part, they just didn't mess with him, because it's just like...
Too powerful.
And sometimes Mitchell would say, you know, they'd call the general manager and said, here's your new... So, what? Yeah, that's it. You're going to like it, aren't you? Yeah. And so let's just say that Mitchell did a lot of things in a grand emperor fashion, you know, like this is the way it is. And so what happened was, as Mitchell's retirement approached, certain people in the corporation said, we're going to get styling back under wraps here, because we're going to put them on a short leash, because, you know, Mitchell spent money and hand over fist and had all these projects and personal vanity concept projects. All of them were cool. I'd see them every day where I lived. And so they put Irv Rybicki in, and basically, it was basically, yeah, you got the job, but you're going to do what you're told. And that just changed the whole tone of design. And they didn't, they were basically deballed for a few years until Chuck Jordan came
Jordan
in.
was much more like Mitchell.
Yeah,
regard.
yeah, very.
But the system had changed at that point. He
system
never had the power that
No,
a Mitchell or an Earl had.
no, and the system changed, and then Chuck was followed by, God, why am I blanking? You know who I'm talking
Not Wayne Cherry.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Wayne Cherry.
Boy, you think there's more people there. That's why I was like, well, Wayne just left.
No,
you know?
yeah, it's an incredible thing. And, actually, to Wayne's credit, he started to get GM Design's mojo back. That started under Wayne, make no mistake. And then by the time the new transition happened, GM was well and truly designed with Ed Welburn.
Right.
Was when Bob Lutz came on board, Bob, the first thing he did is pull the final shackles off design. Said, you guys got to do your
If
thing.
Lutz had showed up fast or sooner, Wayne Cherry would have gotten a lot more credit.
Right, and GM might not have gone into bankruptcy, maybe, but you can't fight that economic tsunami in '08. But
the product would have been better.
yeah. But it's an unbelievable legacy. And when you go to the design staff, which is still the coolest building, I mean, it is so cool. I went there since I was a kid. But
Wasn't that an Eero Saarinen?
Yeah. It is absolutely the coolest thing. And you even talk to young designers now, and they go in there and say, yeah, man, you can feel the ghost in the hallway. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And so Chuck was there in the 50s under Earl, and he did some of those Motorama show cars as a young designer.
But he pissed a lot of people off at GM because I know he was not invited back to a lot of stuff that the company did.
Well, because after he wrote a lot of what he really thought about a lot of things, And
I remember he once told me that he wanted me one day, which I never did, he wanted me to see GM Design Studios' version of what the Cadillac Alante was going to be. Because as you know, it was designed by Pininfarina. And he just said, at the time he was still at the company, he said, I would love to show it to you. I just can't. They won't let me, or they'll kill me if I show you. And I've always wondered, what the hell did that thing look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I remember when we got to see the alternates for the Ford Thunderbird that weren't picked, and I forget who published them. Was it Automobile? I think it was Automobile, and every one of them was better than the production one. I mean, well, that was the thing. In the dark days of design, when I left advertising, it was, I remember they brought a bunch of the agency types down to the basement of design to see the new Impala, which was going to be the 2000 Impala, which was the worst committee think crash of a car. And that's when I said, you know what, I can't, I got to get out of here, because whatever's going on here is not good, and I got to go do my own thing. But when you walk around design staff and you saw the craptastic production cars they were building, and then you saw the illustrations on these guys' cubes and their desks, and it's just like, what's going on here? There is a disconnect between the talent and the upper management of GM, and that was, the John Smale, P&G, Ron Zarella era,
right,
when the marketers were going to tell them what they would build. And fortunately, at the end of Wayne Cherry's reign, they started to change, and then Lutz got there, and then Ed Welburn just opened up the barn doors and said, we're going for it.
Well, I would add on to what you said. It wasn't just the marketing people. Manufacturing had so much more power
dictates.
now.
Yeah, dictates.
Yeah. Oh, you can't have deep draws in that. Steel? No, you have to have shallow draws so we can run these things, the stamping presses.
Tumble home was never going to work. And see, that was absolute 180 degrees from the Mitchell era. It's just like, this is your car, you figure out how to build it. And, you know,
And
the guys,
Listen, the guys at Fisher
guys-
Body were geniuses.
yeah, and Mitchell's track record was unbelievable. That guy had a golden gut in terms of he would bring cars that look like concept cars to the masses. He was a genius at it, even more so than Harley Earl, I think.
And not just was it manufacturing dictating things, but purchasing, which had this diktat too to get the cheapest components possible.
Yeah.
Said, okay, these turn signals have to be in everything. These, the corporate componentry stuff just started to permeate any kind of a car, whether you were in a Chevrolet or a Cadillac. It was the same stupid turn signal.
Yeah, so, the passing of Chuck Jordan, I mean, you just have to stand back and realize that there are only, 6 people now who have run GM
In the
design
history of the
in the
corporation.
history of the company. And when you see now, I mean, you hear designers leaving to go run to Hyundai Kia, or they're leaving to go to Audi, and, all that. I mean, GM has this legacy, continuity. They had some bad patches, but they're firing on all cylinders now.
I'd agree. I was just at the GM preview for what they're going to have at the Detroit Auto Show, and I can't talk about everything I saw because it's embargoed, but there are some things. GMC has got this truck coming out called the Terrain HD, which is like...
the pickup?
Yeah, the pickup.
Yeah, they showed it. I saw it. I looked at it on the GM site today, and it's got a nice front end.
It's pretty cool looking. It's got real presence.
I think they're telegraphing what the next GMC pickup's going to look like.
I think so.
Obviously.
It looks awfully production to me.
Yeah.
And then they showed the Buick Verano, which again I can talk about because they've even shown a little spy shot of the front quarter of the vehicle, and not bad, not bad. This is a compact car for Buick to get into.
This is the Cruze, right? Their version of the Cruze.
It's based on the Cruze, but interestingly is built at, or going to be built at the Orion plant here in Michigan, which is also going to build what was going to be called the Aveo,
The Sonic.
and is now going to be the Sonic. And so that's kind of interesting. Again, for GM, this is a massive step forward to be able to flex these plants, to build a Cruze-based platform vehicle or an Aveo, now Sonic-based one.
Yeah.
So Sonic is a better name.
Yeah, because people were pronouncing Aveo or Aveo.
Right.
So-
And I don't know, it's just kind of a weak name. And you know what? This is another perfect segue because one of our sponsors is the Chevy Cruze, and we should talk a little bit about that as well. Especially they've got some pretty good stuff from an infotainment standpoint on the car that I'm kind of impressed with. And let me just see if I can call up this this thing here that I've got to talk about it, because one of the things that stuck out for me is they've got this app, because everybody's got apps on their smartphones now. So they've got an app that they call MyLink that you can start your car with your smartphone. So on a cold winter morning, if you don't have a heated garage or a garage at all, and you want to finish your cup of coffee and have the thing warmed up by the time you get out there, it's kind of cool that they've got this app for your smartphone that you can use to start up your car.
The world's gone app crazy.
Right.
Hey, John, where are our guests?
Oh, yeah. Where are our guests? Because we promoted today that Kamatni Rollins from Automotive Rhythms would be here. Well, he's not here because of a massive snowstorm on the East Coast, and he couldn't get out of Baltimore today to make it out here. So we'll have to have him back some other time, because I think it'd be great to have Kamatni on here. And then Jason Vines was supposed to be here tonight as well, but he had some business trip. He told me he got in at 3:30 this morning. He said he's just wiped out, could not make it here today. So if anybody was wondering why John and Peter are just chatting amongst themselves, That is why.
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us.
That's wild.
Ben,
You the man, right? That's timely. That's
Yeah,
good.
that's gonna come out of Ben's salary.
Another interesting thing that came out this week is the Center for Automotive Research, based in Ann Arbor, did this whole study on if the Obama administration really does push the CAFE regulations to 60 miles a gallon, it's going to add like $6,400 to the cost of a car and cost all these jobs and revenue. And
Not gonna happen.com.
I think you're right.
I mean, I do believe we're gonna see a gas spike, and it's gonna stay up there, and then people will decide what they're gonna drive. Funny how that works, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing when you let the marketplace decide for itself, it makes much more rational decisions.
You know, and then getting back to what you were talking about with the Ford, I mean, everyone says they're crazy to have these 4 cylinders and the 6 in the F-150. They're not crazy. I'm telling you, if we get a real serious gas spike here, they're gonna look like geniuses.
Right. But the point I keep making too is because I've had this argument with several people that, oh, well, you know, finally the Obama administration forced them to build this stuff. And it was like, no, when you had a UAW contract that forced your labor cost to be $75 an hour, and nobody else in the world is paying that kind of money, and you can't build a small car in the United States with UAW labor and make a profit at it, guess what you don't do? You don't invest in those kinds of products.
Yeah.
So the real change has been getting rid of those legacy costs, getting competitive labor contracts. Now they can build Focuses and Sonics in the U.S., in fact, in Michigan, with UAW labor, and still make a profit on these things.
Yeah, it's just it's been an unbelievable transformation in this business, that's for sure.
So what else? What else is going on in this crazy industry?
Well, let's see. People should read my year-end issue, but please don't read it in one sitting. It's not meant to be read. But I do have some people.
Because you did. You were pulling out a bunch of stuff from a year ago, right?
Well, no, it's the highlights of the year, my columns, and then we do the highlights from On the Table, but those are all rewritten in some respects. And
so when you were wrong, you rewrote it so that it's right now?
No, I rewrote it so it's even funnier now. So I have a few hardcore guys who write me and say that's their thing. They do. They sit down and read the whole thing in one sitting. And I said, well, cool. But it's up for a couple weeks, so. There's a lot of highlights, and when you go back and look through the year, it's just like, man.
A lot happened.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, we should talk a little bit about what we want to do next week, too. Since it's just before Christmas, we're going to give out presents and lumps of coal.
Naughty and nice.
Naughty and nice. Anything automotive, even if it's just remotely connected to the automobile. So any of you viewers out there, if you've got any ideas of who should get a present or what, or a lump of coal, let us know. But we're going to come armed with our own ideas, too.
And Mr. Welch will be here.
David Welch is going to be here. In fact, I saw him today, and he absolutely confirmed he wants to be here and will. So that's all pretty good.
Well, John Manoogian just texted me. You know who John Manoogian is?
Yeah,
the designer. Tell John I still have sketches of the GM design version of the Elante.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have to,
John,
we'll have to meet, and you will have to bring it'll be like, remember in Raiders of the Lost Ark at the end where the guy finally opened the Ark and, oh, it's beautiful, and then his face melted off. That's what's going to happen when John shows us this.
That's pretty good.
So John just let us know, to our audience, John Manoogian was one of the top GM designers and had a lot to do with the CTS and CTS Coupe especially, and he and his guys, and it's too bad he's not doing that anymore, but he's still around, still doing stuff, so.
Well, let's get to a few more of our sponsors.
Well,
and
John just texted again, in a dark alley somewhere. Should we go to rapid fire?
Well, yeah, we should, but let's take care of a few more sponsors here. Oh,
Okay.
I forgot to mention when I said the Chevy Cruze one, I forgot to mention their website. Go to Chevrolet.com/Cruze. That's Cruze. And then we have to also talk about Bridgestone, my favorite sponsor. They've been so good with us. Go to bridgestonetire.com. They're really pushing these run flat tires, and I know the automakers would love to do that. Get rid of the spare, get rid of the jack. Boy, talk about getting rid of weight and opening up room in a car.
Well, these run flats have gone, the development of them is unbelievably.
Yeah. Hardcore performance enthusiasts, no, you're not going to want to run flat,
No.
But for 99% of the general public out there, they're perfect. And then dowbetamate.com. And one of the products they'd like us to talk about is, for all of you engineers in the business, Spec Flex. And it's actually a foam. They call it Spec Flex Pu. I'm not sure what Pu is.
Well, let's just clarify, it's not an anti-dandruff shampoo.
Right. But it's a foam that they use for the instrument panel and interior trim. Very low density foam, and what's the purpose of that? Well, now, fast cycle time in the molding machines. If you have a low density foam, you can just make the stuff a whole lot faster, save time. It's also got a soft touch, very luxurious feel to it. So it's amazing what you can do with material.
This making cars, man, it's complicated.
People can't believe it. Last week I was in Mexico. That's why I wasn't for this show. And I'm down there. There's this company called TI Automotive. They make these gas tanks. 6 separate layers of plastic that go into making this blow molded tank. But the amazing thing is they extrude these 6 separate layers all at the same time. I don't know how they do it. I mean, I watched it being done, and I still said, I don't know how this is being done, even as I watch it. And the machinery to run this stuff, yeah, people have no clue how unbelievably complicated it is. But I think it's time to do rapid fire. Ben, let's bring up that music and graphic.
Hey, John, quick question.
Oh.
Where will people find Bridgestone, and what URLs can they go to?
Oh, Ben, you are so good. Bridgestone, bridgestonetire.com, and dowbetamate.com. And now, let's bring up the graphic. Jim Campbell is preaching to us from Calgary, Canada. All right, Canada. He says, your Autoline Daily discussed 60 miles per gallon. He says, I think this is wrong. You're right. People will just drive more. He's right. If you get a car that gets 60 miles to the gallon, you know what? You just made it a whole lot cheaper to drive, so people will drive more. He says raising the tax on gasoline is going to be the only way to curb greenhouse gas.
Well, we've talked about that forever. And every time we do, we get lambasted by somebody.
Right. Unsprung wants to know, why isn't the Chevy Cruze selling very well? It's not doing that bad. I think they did 8,000 units last month. They're still very early in the ramp. I'll bet you they're just not even at full line speed yet.
It's still a little
got there.
still a little early, and don't forget, it's just recently where gas has gone up.
Right.
And that's going to be an issue. I mean, the people, our esteemed representatives in Washington and Sacramento, I use that. Yeah, right. But anyway, you can't force this stuff on people. There has to be a reason.
Right.
And yeah, we have some excellent small cars now, the Cruze, the Fiesta, we're going to get the Focus. But, I think the Cruze is selling very well, given everything.
I'd say don't judge it yet. The first month, the numbers were very, very small. The second month, a little bit so. Third month, like I said, the 8,000 units, that's not that bad. Give it another month or two, and then we'll really know how well it's doing or not.
Yeah.
Ralph Norek from Winnipeg. Boy, we're getting all the Canadians in here today. He says, you guys were discussing how Car of the Year awards were bought by advertising in days gone by. And you mentioned how great the new Sonata is. How much are you influenced by Hyundai now being a major sponsor of the show? Oh, we're shills, man. We'll say anything, not that they're sponsors.
The Sonata's a good car.
Look, we've been raving about the Sonata before they became a sponsor.
Yeah, long before Hyundai came on board.
We'd read the copy they give us. If we really didn't like the car, I don't think we'd be raving about it that much. We've talked in depth, about design, how Joel Piaskowski did all that, and his whole background and where he's gone, and, committing to only doing a 4-cylinder engine. And look, everybody in that mid-size segment's going to follow suit now, too. So, yeah. I think you can trust what we're saying here. I think. You guys will have to be the judge. Jay Cujo wants to know, what's the most fun to drive new car that you've test driven this year? Well, that's easy. It's the Sonata and the Cruze.
I had...
What other sponsors do we have?
Our Autoextremist car of the year was the R8 V8 6-speed. Honorable mention was the Bentley Continental Super Sports and the Mustang Shelby GT500. So it's not exactly a green list, but it's great.
If I look back over the year, and especially the last 3 or 4 months, what have I been talking about the most when I get together with friends and talk about cars and the like? Hyundai Sonata, honest to God. Dodge Durango. I've been raving about that thing. And though it's not getting a whole lot of accolades, the Nissan Juke. I absolutely love driving that thing. So there you go.
Yeah, Nissan hasn't managed to get me one to drive yet, so
Hey, Nissan, get on the stick here.
I wouldn't know. I do like the way it looks. It's got kind of a funky little thing.
It is funky. Davin Gibson wants to know, I was wondering if you could explain how 2 foreign cars can be eligible for North American Car of the Year. It seems to me the Leaf and Sonata should be eligible for Asian Car of the Year. And, well, good question, Davin. And we're just talking about which cars are the best cars and/or trucks that are sold in the North American market. Not necessarily made in North America, but definitely sold in North America. Phil Hopewell says, hi guys, last week I heard a radio commercial in Canada. What's all this Canada stuff tonight? For Cadillac. They used the tagline, Cadillac, the new standard of the world. Sounds like GM has listened to John and Peter and restored the line you've long suggested that they use. Well done. Well, you're the one who's been talking about it.
Yeah, no, they admitted as much. They took my suggestion.
Okay, Tom in northern Michigan, which is close to Canada, says, I recently read about the current Hyundai vehicle lineup already achieving 34.4 CAFE reading, 34.4 miles per gallon. How can this be when not even one of their powertrains achieves even 30 miles to the gallon? That's not right.
No, that's not right.
They have several cars that are rated over 30 miles to the gallon. Can your staff produce info as to how CAFE is determined? Oh, yeah. Tom, great question. Great question. So here's the deal. When they test a car for fuel economy, it never goes on the road. Never. They put it on a chassis dynamometer, and then they run this program that speeds up and slows down the engine, running the rollers on the chassis dyno. And in fact, they do this for emissions, and they measure how much gasoline goes into the engine, and then they collect the emissions that come out the tailpipe. And then they can calculate, well, this much gas went in and this much emissions came out, ergo, the fuel economy must be this. And then, because people were saying, well, wait a minute, the sticker says I should be getting this and I'm not getting anywhere near it. So then they said, okay, your mileage may vary. And then people found out that there was more and more and more variance. So then the EPA kept adding fudge factors. So they never changed the test, but they add in all these fudge factors to a car that's never on the road whatsoever, that is only on a chassis dynamometer. And I should dig up the stuff because I've got more data on it. On the highway, when they test it for the highway fuel economy rating, I want to say it never goes over 55 miles an hour. And even in the stop and go stuff for the city, it never comes to a stop sign and stops. It never comes to a stop light and stops. And that's a problem because as automakers want to add stop-start technology to turn the engine off when you come to a stop sign or a stoplight, the EPA will not give you any credit for that at all. If you go to the expense as an automaker to add this technology, it will not show up on the fuel economy label in better fuel economy. So I'm not trying to pick on the EPA because they have a hugely complicated chore to try to do. The point I'm trying to make is there's nothing easy about it. It is just a Rube Goldberg kind of a thing. Pedro Fernandez wants to know, does the Chinese tire tariff affect only Chinese brands or all the tires built by Western companies in that country? I think what he's meaning is, tire brands that we're well familiar with but are made in China. That's a good question. It doesn't affect all Chinese tires, and I believe it only affects Chinese brand tires. I'm going to have to check into that, though. Hey, Ben, let's bring in a phone call here. I see we've got a few of them.
Hi, John. This is Mark from Lapeer. How does GM get away with advertising, we all fall down, we all get back up, GM 1908, when they are not a 1908 company? That company's been dissolved. It should be a 2009 company. Myself and a lot of others lost a lot of money in GM, and it's disappointing that they can do this false advertising. Thank you.
Well, I mean, yes, you could say that, but...
Yeah, technically you're right. The General Motors that we knew for most of our lives died.
Yeah.
It crashed and burned and was renamed Liquidations Motor, or Motors Liquidation. But come on, let's get real. The heritage of the company, the people, the facilities, all that, the brands, the intellectual property, it's the same company.
1908.
And I feel for you, though, for having lost money, having invested in it. But let's make no mistake, it's still the same people that are making that company go, even though from a legal standpoint, the old corporation crashed and burned.
Yeah.
Ben, let's bring in another.
Hey guys, it's Nathan Keeley from Zanesville, Ohio, and since we have cars like the Black Ops Edition, Jeep Wrangler, and the upcoming Chevy Sonic, what are some favorite video game titles that you guys like to see cars in the future?
Huh?
What kind of car video games would we like to see in the future?
Well,
I think he's asking because there's the Black Ops edition of the Jeep, and now there's the Sonic, presumably. I think he's equating it to Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yep.
What other video games should they name cars after?
oh man, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm out of my league on that one. Let's bring in another.
Hey guys, this is Frank from Bridgestone, New Jersey. Glad to have Mr. Welsh back. My question is around
This
the
was from
Volt.
last
I'm
week.
curious as to
Or 2
why
weeks.
GM is not spreading that architecture further out, especially to Buick and Cadillac. I mean, I understand they're going to show the Volt MPV at the Detroit Auto Show, but why not? You got to get more scale, I would think, with this platform if you're going to really make some money. And they had the beautiful concept of the Cadillac Converge, which they decided not to do. But I just don't see how you can get the cost down without getting the scale up. I mean, I look at the Volt, and it's a brilliant piece of engineering, but comparably equipped that cost the same as a Cadillac CTS. I just don't think that's sustainable. So, love to hear you guys' thoughts, and Merry Christmas. Thanks, guys.
Well, I think, sure, GM has plans to extend the Bolt. You know, we are not privy to all of them, but we're going to see some things come out that are heavily influenced by the Bolt.
Well, I'd say this. If I were GM, I would stick my toe in the water with the Volt and see if this stuff is really going to catch on. As we've talked about on this show a lot, I love EVs. I want to buy an EV. I'm an EV enthusiast, but I don't let my enthusiasm cloud my judgment as to how I think these things are going to sell. I don't think they're going to sell very well. So GM is doing the Chevrolet Volt in the U.S., I should say North America, in Europe, along with the Opel Ampera, and they're going to do it in China. And I think if this thing takes off and sells well, you're going to see all kinds of derivatives come. And if I'm right, and the EV market doesn't go very far, they'll say, whew, at least we didn't throw everything in the kitchen sink in on that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, John.
Okay, Lance at Airflow Innovations Corp says, I'm the owner of a small automotive parts firm. We design, build, and sell high-performance parts for modern domestic cars and trucks, and expect to have some relationship with the big three car companies. Question, I'm considering establishing a facility in the Detroit area as a base for U.S. operations. I'm curious about you and your guest's opinion, my co-host's opinion, on the importance or not for a small manufacturer like us to have a facility in Detroit. Sub-question, possibly some of the untraditional obstacles one might face specifically in Detroit. Look, if you want to do business with the big three, no question about it. It will help to have a presence here.
Yes.
Not that you have to be here, but it'll help. Why? Because you just don't understand how this town works unless you're here. People in this industry live, breathe, and die it. You know, Peter and I have been talking about design and engineering and manufacturing tonight. If you want to find out stuff, there's not like one source here. You learn a little bit here when you run into somebody at a hockey game. You go to dinner and you learn something else. You're at a barbecue, you learn, and you start piecing things together. And unless you're here, I don't care how good you are at Skype or email or phone calling or faxing or any sort of thing, it's not the same as being face-to-face with somebody and just having some good time together when they relax, and then you really start to learn things.
Yeah, and you know, people have said to me, well, you could do Autoextremist from anywhere. And I said, yeah, you know what? I used to think that, but not really. If you're not here, you'd lose the whole thing. You'd lose the vibe, the edge, so if you want to be in this business, you're gonna have to be here.
That's why I like a lot of people say, oh, you know, we don't really need manufacturing in this country. We'll just do all the design work because we're so creative and all that. But you know what? So much of what you design has got to be manufactured. And if you don't understand that manufacturing, you're not going to know how to design it right. And you literally have to grow up in a culture where all those kinds of people are around you, living, breathing, and talking this stuff. Maybe not every single second, every single day, but a lot. And if you don't have that culture, you're going to lose not just the manufacturing, but all the design and engineering and development work that goes along with it. And that's why you've got to keep this kind of culture where everybody's around one another and sharing ideas, bouncing ideas off each other. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox for the moment. Ben, let's bring in another phoner here.
Hey guys, Jonathan Brown out in Old Town, New Jersey. Listen, you two guys are so fabulous, you don't even need any guests. Although I have to tell you, it's always great when you do have interesting guests. I have to tell you, you two guys by yourselves are fantastic. Of course, had I known, I would have flown out there tonight to be on the show if you would have left. Anyways, listen, keep up the great work. Of course, I'm kidding. You guys are the best, and I look forward to your show every week. Have a nice day.
Cool.
Happy holidays.
Thanks,
Jonathan. And Ben, another phoner. We've got another on the list here.
Hi, this is Jeff W. from Albany. In the latest Car and Driver 10 Best competition, the Honda Accord somehow made the list again. I was just curious, do any of you agree with this, or is this just another example of how many of these car magazine awards are becoming increasingly irrelevant? Thanks.
No, I think Accord's legitimate to be on that. And, you know, look, I got all the respect in the world for the guys at Car and Driver. You know, they're not doing stuff because an advertiser said this or that and the other thing.
Yeah, no, none of them are anymore. And Car and Driver Automobile never did. Motor Trend did, but that was a long time ago. Right. So, yeah, the Accord still deserves to be there. It's not.
It's well engineered.
It's well engineered. It's boring as a brick to look at, right. And hopefully Honda will get their mojo back. So
we need Honda to get its mojo back because it's sad to see where they're at right now.
Well, they're going to show that concept of the new Civic at Detroit. It better be good.
Yeah. Ben, I see Youngblood has called in. Let's bring him up.
Hey, John and Peter, this is Youngblood, Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, can you pan over on your guests for tonight? My computer's pulling up those Paris models from the Paris show. Yeehaw! Yeah. Okay, now for a serious thing. I thought you guys had some time tonight. You might talk about that torture test that F-150 Ford has put that EcoBoost 3.5 V6 through. All the different versions, they put them through the same engine. The torture, I guess they call it a torture test. Something to talk about tonight. And then pan on the models again. Later. Bye.
Are you familiar with what he's talking about, this torture testing? It is really cool. I'm glad you brought that up. I've been dying to do something about this on Autoline Daily for several months now, but it's just going to take us an enormous amount of editing time to put all this stuff together. But what they do, they pulled an engine and they ran all this different kind of torture testing on it. I remember seeing one video where they were hauling logs up a mountain in Oregon or something like that, and then they entered it in the Baja 1000 or something, and a
very used engine, and it ran, and
it's impressive.
Yeah,
it really is impressive. Will in Minnesota says, we know Autoline After Hours are not big admirers of Japanese car companies lately. That's not entirely true. Who among them is doing the best job? Is it Nissan? No. Is it Suzuki? No, Suzuki. I don't know how they're going to stay in business here. I'll tell you who I think is the best Japanese car company right now, Subaru. I am blown away by those guys. Their sales numbers aren't big, but no one told them that the world went through a major recession. They forgot to tell them that because their sales did not go down. In fact, their sales were up strongly in 08, 09, and this year they're up strong. I'm just super impressed by that company.
Yeah, I agree with you. They don't build one thing I would look twice at, but I'm impressed.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. And Will says, what about the British automakers? Well,
you know, I'm sorry. I'm the only car enthusiast on the planet that doesn't like the new full-size Jaguar XJ. I don't think it's the design statement of the century. I'm sorry. It's just, to me, it looks like an aircraft carrier going down the road. So
I would agree. I don't like the XJ exterior styling.
The interior's cool.
I do like the interior, but I'm with you.
I just, you know, do a modern-day E-Type. Do something. You know, I don't want Jaguar to be, oh, we can build a luxury car like Audi or Mercedes. You know, do something really exciting.
George from Brooklyn wants to know, based on sales, is the Ford Fiesta a dud? No.
No, it hasn't been, no.
Yeah, you know, this sort of goes back to what we said about the Cruze. Give it a little bit more time.
Yeah.
And
I'm not saying that because I own one, but you have to give them more time than that.
Right.
You know.
So it's not a smash hit out of the box, but, you know, I would say to really judge the initial impact of a car, you've got to give it about 6 months in the marketplace.
Well, I wrote about that in my column. It used to be a car manufacturer would have 2-3 model years. In the old days of the business, you'd have 2 or 3 model years. Then that shrunk down to 2 years tops. Then it was 18 months. And then I think it was a couple years ago, I said you have 12 months. Now, I believe you have 6 months. You know within the first 6 months if this car is going to be just okay, a dud, or a hit. That's how this business has become such a pressure cooker, 24/7. What have you done for us lately? It used to be you were only good as your last quarter. Now it's like, it's just unbelievable what's going on. Mm-hmm. And the flavor of the moment, is it just the flavor of the moment, or does it have some sustainable power of sales over several years? I mean, that's what this business has come down to. And then you have pillars like the F-150. Who they are going to sell that thing, and they're not gonna miss. Ford's not gonna miss on that truck. And I think when these buyers get a hold of the F-150 with that EcoBoost V6, I think they've got a whole new market that they're gonna.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that.
But yeah, 6 months.
6 months to really judge it, and then I think, depending on the segment it's in, 2 years.
Yeah, well, especially the small cars.
Well, I would say especially highly styled cars, because something can be red hot out of the box. I mean, red hot out of the box, and 2 years later it just dies because it's too trendy. And as you know, things that are trendy go out of trend.
Yeah, and I think with the Fiesta is telegraphing Ford's new design. We're immersed in this business, and we've seen that design for a while. But out in mainstream America, Fiesta's going to be wow. Wow, that's kind of radical. And then when they see the Focus, it's really radical compared to the Cruze. So, but it's going to establish this tone and tempo for passenger cars for Ford in the market. So, yeah, they're going to need some more time. We'll need more time to determine that.
Ben, I think we got time for another call here. Let's bring in Mike from Philadelphia.
The show, Mike from Philadelphia. For next week, you should give the Nissan Leaf a lump of coal, because that's what it's going to be running on. Well, that's my comment. Thanks. Love the show. Bye.
That's pretty clever. Yes. The coal companies cannot wait for electric cars. They love the fact that these are coming, because even today, with all the alternatives we're talking about, still roughly 51% of all the electricity in this country is generated by coal. In China, it's 75%.
Oh, man, China's.
Well, anyway, Peter, this is a good time to wrap up. We've been going at this for an hour. So, should remind everybody to follow us at facebook.com/Autoline Detroit, twitter.com/Autoline, autoextremist.com, or twitter.com/Autoextremist. So, there's a lot of ways to follow what we're doing here. And don't forget, you can get everything on your smartphone or BlackBerry at Stitcher. And remember, next week, we're going to be doing presents and lumps of coal. So any suggestions you have, we'll take them.
Yeah, we'll take them.
We're not going to use them. We're not promising we're going to use them, but we're definitely going to look at them. And so, real good, Mr. De Lorenzo. We shall do it again next week.
Mr. McElroy.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone, passion for excellence. Chevrolet, the all-new Chevrolet Cruze. Get used to more. Dow Automotive Systems, improving durability and increasing design flexibility with Betamate structural adhesives at dowbetamate.com. And by Hyundai. Experience the 2011 Hyundai Sonata today at HyundaiSonata.com.
Oh boy. So, what are you driving this week?
I've been driving a Nissan Altima Coupe. So, nice car.
Yeah.
Does just fine. CVT, you know, Nissan's about the only one sticking with a CVT these days.
I just don't like them. And,
they're fine. They're okay, but yeah.
They're not for the enthusiast driver.
They're not for an enthusiast driver, no.
And then Nissan fancies himself as, we make exciting cars. And matter of fact, I blasted them at the end of my column because the Maxima, I said was my least favorite car of the year.
Wow.
It was the Maxima, full zoot, you know, four-door sports car, blah, blah, blah. But you put that CVT in, it was just like a downer. Bad. Because that's a great engine.
Right.
You know, that's one of the industry's best engines. Mm-hmm. And you combine it with that CVT, and it's like you're sending orders down to the engine room for the chipmunks to get rolling, you know. It's just, come on.
And I also had a Kia Optima this week that is actually parked at my house right now because I lost the stupid keys.
Wow.
I was out working in the yard Saturday, and I must have dropped the keys out there, and then the snow hit.
So, in other words, they're under 3 inches of ice.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, you know, the driving conditions this week were unbelievable here. I mean, the major freeways literally had 2 inches of ice.
I don't ever remember it.
I've never been. I never remembered it like that.
And then you saw the 402 in Canada.
Oh man!
Oh my God, that was incredible.
Yeah.
All these cars trapped out there. I saw a semi on its side, half buried in snow. And I heard some guy on the radio or TV who lives out there saying they've never seen anything like this.
Well, Syracuse, New York, I think that's what I heard correctly, had 66 inches of snow now.
That is unreal.
And winter hasn't even started. I guess normally they got, 100 inches or whatever, but 66 now
That's
in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
And see, normally I like when the snow comes out because I said, now I can drive 10/10, be at the absolute ragged edge, not know if I'm going to make it around the turn, and I'm only going 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And, use the handbrake turn for everything because it's just fun. But this is glare ice. I mean, it's hard to control anything. Snow's one thing, ice is totally different.
Yeah, I mean, the classic thing in Michigan, too, is you get, I don't want to stereotype people, but you get people who have all-wheel drive. And if they don't understand what they're doing, they think, well, I can pull away from a light. You can't stop,
right.
Especially if it's icy. There's always people slow in the uptake every first snow or ice, especially if there's ice, and they end up getting in trouble with their all-wheel drive.
I should start keeping track of it, but I'll bet half of all the vehicles that I see in a ditch
are all-wheel drive. So they get overconfident.
Well, they get overconfident, and they also. I've been in all-wheel drive vehicles without snow tires, and if you're on ice, they're no good. It doesn't matter. All-wheel drive just means all 4 tires are spinning.
Yeah.
But I do like driving in the wintertime in the snow. It's a riot. It's.
I learned car control. Well, I had a famous go-kart, the Orange Juicer Mark I. I bought this bug cart, and I stripped it and painted it Dayglow orange. And we terrorized our neighborhood one whole summer. And the thing had a Mach 6, McCullough Mach 6.
That's a lot of motor.
And it had a top speed of 65 miles an hour. And we drove the living shit out of it. And I'll never forget, we've been running it all day. And you mix oil and the gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like a cloud of oil and gas, and this township cop pulled into our driveway. And we're sitting there like red-handed because they got calls.
That you were screaming around the neighborhood.
Yeah, because I mean that's seriously fast
and loud, I'm sure.
Oh,
X6 with no muffler.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Or a big trumpet kind of exhaust.
Yeah. And this cop, he gets out of his car and said, "You kids haven't been running on the street, have you?" And he looked at us, kind of smiled, and said, "Nope." He said, "Didn't think so," and he backed out. It was good, but I graduated from that, and I used to take my sister's Camaro out when I was 14 in the snow, specifically in the snow, just because I could slide it around. And it was great. It was absolutely fabulous.
Well, there's two ways that I really learned how to drive as a kid. One was in the snow, going up to the church parking lot, which was this church school kind of thing, so a huge parking lot. And just learn how to do four-wheel drifts through turns. Set up like a little course, go around this light pole, go over to the edge of the fence, come by the edge of the driveway, go off to the road, by the baseball field, and set up this little course and just learn how to drift the thing. And then the other way was my parents had a cottage out in the middle of the state in the Irish Hills, and there was nothing there, just cornfields. And driving on dirt roads, man, it's awesome. And what made it awesome was that if anybody was coming in the other direction, it raised big clouds of dust because it was dirt roads. So all you'd have to do is look down the roads away, and if there was no dust, that meant nobody was there. Go flat out. You were in no danger of hitting anyone, even though you're coming around blind turns in my dad's station wagon, 4,500 pounds with some 427 V8 in the front, full sideways, full opposite lock, and that's how I learned how to drive.
Yeah. Now it's just like everything's so politically correct. Now you have to go to a driving school if you want to learn how to do any of that.
And you don't learn any. Oh, you mean like a racing driving school? I thought you meant like driver's ed driving school, which is a joke.
Yeah. So. All right,
cool,
kids.
Man. Yeah.
I thought it went pretty well, just the two of us.
I did too.
That's what we'll call it, just the two of us.
Just the two of us. Right.
You do know the problem with how written material